Welcome to the Branded Impact Podcast. On this show, we go beyond surface level branding, honest conversations with industry leaders, behind the scenes of aligned brand building, and actionable insights to help you elevate your presence. I'm your host, Jo Espejo, aka Jo. Hit subscribe and join me each week for the Branded Impact Podcast. Welcome back to the Branded Impact Podcast. I am so excited to be joined today by our guest, Annamarie Fernyak. She is the founder and CEO of Mind, Body, Align, a mindfulness teacher, and she is the author of Right Side of Happiness. She is on a mission to build stronger, more mindful communities through education, storytelling, and intentional leadership. Whether she's writing children's books, leading workshops, or exploring the country in her airstream, Annamarie brings curiosity, clarity, and compassion to everything she does. Annamarie, thank you again so much for joining me today. I always love to start by grounding our listeners in your story. So, can you share what led you to create Mind, Body, Align and how your journey as an entrepreneur and mindfulness teacher has unfolded over the years?
Well, thank you, Joe, for inviting me. This is really fun for me to talk about something I'm so passionate about.
Sorry.
It's interesting, when we were talking before, you had mentioned willing to lift as you climb, and that's very important to you. And that was about helping other women entrepreneurs in their work. And that's actually what got me started. So I'm an entrepreneur, consummate entrepreneur. I was an interior designer by trade, had my own interior design business for 20 years and was working in community development. And then I realized community development really was my passion. And so I left the interior design work, was working in community development. That didn't quite work out for me. So then I was looking for my next step. I went to a women's retreat and a woman there, she just loves people and wants to do everything she can to help people transform and be their very best. I was so inspired by that I went back, I got my coaching certification, and my goal then was to help other women, particularly, become their very best, to learn whatever they needed to learn about themselves, and then to move on, to be able to do the things that they really are passionate about. So I started a company called Mind, Body, Align, and it was focused on networking and bringing alternative wellness practices to women. I did that for a couple years, loved it. We had these wonderful events like coffee talks and all kinds of really fun networking events. And where I was really encouraging the local leaders to use their voice to impact other leaders in the community, other female leaders. And then I was asked to teach in a local middle school by one of the women who used to come to all of my events. And so I went, I also teach mindfulness. At the time, I was invited to teach mindfulness for a couple days. And when I was in this middle school, I was just kind of surprised and shocked by what I saw happening in the school system. And I won't go into too much detail. But when I left, I was crying. The
No.
teacher was the teacher was crying and because there were all these things that occurred on those 3 days that I was there. And went back to my team and said, "Is there some way we can help support these kids in the classroom?" And then from there, we developed over a period of many years this amazing curriculum that we now teach and sell in the schools. And so I let my part of my business that was focused on women kind of go because I felt that the real need, the place I could really have an impact was with the children and the schools. So that's where we
That's
are
such
right
a
now.
powerful story. And it's interesting because you pivoted. So many of us are scared to do that. I know for me, for the longest time, it was like, no, you can't leave this because you went to school, you got a degree, this is the career path you chose. And then when I initially got into my own business, I mentioned to you I was doing wedding photography, and then I pivoted, and it was like, wait, why am I? And every time I've pivoted, it's either been based out of a spark for wanting to serve and how can I make the biggest impact? And ultimately, sometimes too, even just, wait, this doesn't align. Like this type of business, even though weddings were amazing, wedding photographers are a gift and you're getting to capture all these amazing moments. But it had me leaving the house on Saturday when my children were home all day. Right. Or then like the family photography, loved it, still had a heart for taking pictures of mamas. But then now I'm competing with trying to figure out how to get to a session and drop children off at practice and pick up and dinner and all of the things. And then it's like, gosh, like, do I let it go? Yes. Like, I just had this calling for wanting to serve. And so I love, like, you mentioned impact and like, what can I do? And it's not that you didn't enjoy it. You smiled and your face definitely shifted when you were remembering about being able to serve women and the impact that you did make. But something happened when you went into that middle school that made you change the trajectory of the impact that you did wanna make. And I think ultimately, to me, I've got children. If you're impacting my children, you're still impacting women everywhere because 'cause you're
Yeah.
able to help their children. So I think
Right, and it's amazing how we have discovered over the last probably 2 years with our new curriculum, we've incorporated this idea of the ripple effect into how we and how into the architecture of our learning, and so we kind of measure how much of an impact this has on the children at home and their families. And we invite the children every lesson to take the lesson home to their parents. And we've created this really comprehensive home learning, I guess you call them modules, these home learning modules that parents can access on our website so that they can continue the learning. And what we're finding is that the parents are learning, their brothers and sisters are learning, so they're taking this learning to pay attention, learning to recognize emotions, learning to feel compassion for other people's emotions, emotional state, the place where they are, feeling self-compassion for where you are. There's those are the kind of skills that we teach.
ripple
It's really
effect.
been an interesting, yeah, that ripple effect is very important to us.
Such a simple name too. I'm like, "Gosh, yeah, I knew that. That's amazing." But yes, it's what like, there and you don't always measure it. Like, who would have known that this woman you went to a retreat and this one woman impacted your life so greatly? And I don't know if you've told her or if she knows. It's like sometimes you don't get to hear back from the people that you impacted or affected, and then it's that one simple action, and then I love that you're incorporating parents because I think it's sometimes hard, especially as a mom, I ask my kids all the time, I'm like, "How was school today?" Trying to figure out a way to get a question that actually gets a response other than, "Fine, good, nothing, I don't know." I'm like, "Oh my gosh," but when they're encouraged to come home and ask us questions,
Mhm.
almost like the entryway and the door that we need as parents at home to be able to get a little bit more involved. So I think that's really cool that you guys have structured it in that way so that
And
it invites.
encouraging them to be the teacher too for their
Ooh,
family and their parents. And I mean, they embrace it. They love it. They come back and they tell stories. So it's really it's fun to watch.
that's awesome. Well, I'm going to kind of circle back a little bit for the branding piece. So, a lot of our listeners are building a brand based on a mission. So, they're also, though, still trying to figure out how they can really incorporate their message and still remain authentic to who they are and what differentiates them. Do you have any tips on how someone can navigate this as they're pivoting or as they're diving into their mission?
Well, I wrote a book called The Right Side of Happiness. And one of the things that I talk about in the book is this importance of understanding the things that are most important to you as an individual. And I call them values. So, getting to know who you are as a person authentically and understanding what your personal values are. And what I've discovered throughout my lifetime, I've pivoted many times in my career, is that every time I made an extreme shift, it was because I recognized that certain very important values of mine were not being honored. Like you talked about the importance of leaving what you were doing because you were not spending enough time with your family. Well, to me, that tells me that your family is top priority for you and is a very important value. So it helps you to then know how to make decisions because you can know if this is not honoring my value of family, then it's an automatic no. Or how can I shift this or compromise this so that it does honor my family? So, to answer your question, I would say that if to your viewers, if you are considering a shift, do a little bit of personal inquiry. Discover what are the things that are most important to you. And you can usually discover it by kind of looking at your past and discovering what were the shifts I made that were empowering me and what were the reasons I made those shifts? What were the things that were most important to me? And then make sure that as you're making this next shift that you're considering those same things. And also, my work is not separate from like anything else about me. I mean, because I'm an entrepreneur, maybe that's a fact of entrepreneurs, I don't know,
So
but
many of us, yes.
my work is just a part of my life. Like when people talk about work-life balance, there's no such thing as that for me because work and life for me, my work is my life is my work, and my work includes my family, my work also includes my self-care, my work al so it's all kind of incorporated together.
That's awesome. Well, not all of us have that. true tendency to be able to like, or not true tendency, that's the wrong word. Not all of us have that ability to incorporate everything into the work life, but I think the authenticity piece and the values, to me, that's something that I ask all of my clients when we're doing any type of work together, whether it even be for just a photo session or for doing anything else, the websites and going all in, encompassing and implementation. But it all comes down to, for me, the foundation. And
Right.
the first question I like to ask my clients is, what is your mission? Why are you even doing what you wanna do, and who do you wanna serve? And then what are your values? And I think that to me, that aligns, and it's interesting because I think the more conversations I have, I'm not sur I can't say I'm surprised, but, like, I'm just always just so happy and, like, lit up by the fact there's so many of us coming together that share so many values, and I think whether that be the messaging or whatnot, it's like it all aligns, but the words and the values and all of that is so important to what you're doing. But
Mhm.
me, you are right. One of the things I like to look at and I measure when I'm making decisions about my business or my growth or whatnot is, am I able to be present for my kids? And does that mean I'm here every single day? No. Do I still make decisions to go to a retreat or a workshop? Yes. But then I also minimize that. And I joke, like, I went to an event in Scottsdale and I wanted to be there for this one lady that I connected with in a community that I'm in to support her. And we did a brand photo session. I stayed for her event. And then she goes, "Hey, so if you want, there's this other event happening Saturday and Sunday in town. You should stay." Said, "Thank you so much. I appreciate the offer. I can come Friday, and I'm literally gonna take the red eye so that I can be home for my daughter's soccer tournament on Saturday." Now, it would have been an amazing opportunity, but that's how I determine, I missed a couple practices. I was gone for a couple days, but then I was still home to be here for the important things. But yes, it allows you to navigate so many important decisions if you come back to the foundation. Why are you doing this? And what are your values? And so I have to determine, what am I going to go to? And I do travel occasionally, and it's easier now that the kids are bigger. But still, I then have to look and be like, wow, I traveled in August. I was invited to come to something in September. And then I know I'm going again in October. And I was like, I can't do September. The event sounds amazing. And I'm sure it's going to be amazing. But for this phase of my life, I'm going to have to pass so that I can limit how often I'm gone because of my present values and for this time of my life. Now, once my kids are grown and graduated and out of the house, maybe I'll travel more. I don't know. For now, those values are so important. And I think people, for lack of being cliche, undervalue the importance of it. Like, we just get so caught up in the shoulds and the like. I have a tendency to be very competitive with myself. And so sometimes I even find myself going too much and overcommitting and going crazy. And then I have to take a step back and be like, hold on a minute. What am I doing to myself? But the values is such a core piece. And you said something. What did you say? When you were talking about like kids teaching, it was like, yes, being able to understand other people's feelings, but then also keying into your own
Self-compassion, yeah.
self compassion. And I think I grew up the oldest child. I'm a definite people pleaser. I still find myself sometimes when I'm making decisions that are truly being compassionate to myself, almost as selfish. So it's a struggle for me, but I don't know. Any tips on that? Like when you're finding
Well,
peace,
and
like,
I mean, you're a woman, you're a mother. The thing that I've learned over the years is that if women focus at all on the self-care things that are important for their mental health and their physical health, it's considered selfish.
yes,
But for men, it's not so much. And I realize you probably don't want this to be that kind of gender type conversation,
we can go there.
but I think it's important for women to recognize this tendency that of, oh my gosh, this feels selfish to me, and then to choose something different.
I love
It's
that.
a habitual way of thinking that has been ingrained in us culturally for hundreds of years, and it's not easy to remove. It really takes noticing the tendency to believe this and then choosing something different over and over and over again. So it's changing the habit, right?
Changing the
And
habit,
every
reprogramming
time you
yourself.
choose something different, that habit gets more ingrained and you feel less and less of whatever the emotion is that you feel. It could be guilt, it could be shame, it could be, just a little bit of something in the pit of your stomach. So it's a process.
When I think it is a process and it's your I feel like we spend so much time struggling over this, but it has been something that's been happening for hundreds of years. And so then there is a movement and there is a shift and there are more women that are owning this and taking it on. And then
Mhm,
I laugh and I go, "We know this though." If you were to be logical, I like to use the like put your own mask on first in the airplane. We tend to forget that. We tend to, as women, want to help everyone else first,
mhm,
and then we wanna make sure that they're good, but then we forget that if we don't even have our own oxygen mask on first, there's only so much you're gonna be able to help somebody else before you're done, but it's so much easier to say that. Like, in an emergency situation, they we've when you fly and they're like, "Okay, when the oxygen mask drops, please put yours on first, and then help your child or help the other person that can't." But we
mhm,
tend to wanna help everybody else and not fill our own cup, but I like that. And it takes acknowledgement and then making that small, simple decision to do something else. And it doesn't have to be every single time, but the priority. And I think when you're talking about mind and alignment and body and all the things, it's even as simple as, are you drinking enough water? Are you getting the exercise that you need? Or I'm guilty of none of these. Guilty of not making a priority for any of these, but not drinking enough water, not sleeping enough. Am I eating the right way? I will sit there and make sure that my children are eating all the things and they have their snacks and they have all that stuff, and I show up on the sidelines, I'm like, "I didn't bring anything for myself. Everybody else is good, but I forgot myself." So, that's fun, but I like that you're educating that, and I love that you're starting with the children and that you're tying that into teaching the adults and the ripple effect, because hopefully this next generation of children will be able to not only be empathetic towards others, but also be that self-compassion. So talk to me a little bit about community, because you've mentioned that, and I see you smiling. I think that this is something that you're super passionate about. So what role has community played in shaping your brand?
I would say everything. Started out I opened my first business in a downtown area of our Rust Belt community that was revitalizing. And I located it there because it was symbolizing of life that I wanted to live, like a quality of life that I wanted to be a
Okay.
part of, and had never really been a part of in our community because it didn't exist, because everything was blighted at the time. So I located my business specifically there. And then after 15 or so years there, I realized that the reality was I was way more invested in the community development part of it than I was in the interior design part of it.
Okay.
So then I moved into community development. So I was involved in the revitalization of the historic buildings. When that didn't quite work out, I realized that it really was this sense of community that was important to me. I went into building a community with women, which didn't exist in our community before. There were all kinds of clubs for men. Not that we were a women's club, but we were a group of women meeting and talking about business and entrepreneurism and how to be our best selves. None of that really existed just for women. So I built this community, and then I realized after a while, well, during COVID actually was when when the real transformation happened. This was after I'd started working in the schools. I realized that without a solid educational system for our children, the community was never really gonna redevelop.
So you went to the beginning where you can really make the
Oh, I
impact.
went to the beginning. My focus and my husband, we both have a number of businesses that are all community development oriented. My focus is community development, and it's starting now. My focus is starting with the educational system and with our children.
That's so cool. So some of the things that you're doing, so it's an educational system. Now, how are you getting that message across in your marketing? And I know you're a published author and you've got support. So one of the things that we were talking about before the show was you've got an amazing PR person and you've got an amazing team of people, but how do you maximize that? Because you are only one person. So then what are some of the things that you've done to really be able to help take your mission and your vision and get it out into the world?
It's been a challenge. My company has been around since 2016. I did the pivot in um, 2019,
Okay.
2020, right around COVID. And, During that time, my company has gone through a number of different branding strategies. So we've done everything from hiring marketing agencies to doing it ourselves. Maybe I should put that in the reverse. Doing it ourselves to hiring marketing agencies. And both have been successful in some ways. Doing it myself really helped me to understand the mission, the vision, the core values. It really helped me to understand what my demographic was because I was out there talking to people all the time, learning what the need was in the community and wanting to understand how could I create my brand so that I was meeting their need or what need do they have that my brand was going to satisfy. And then we hired a marketing agency who came in and helped to create the visuals for that, like turn that into a visual brand. Help me to understand what does that demographic need to see? How do they need to see it? That was partially successful. I think there were still some areas of branding that and areas of my demographic who I'm selling to that I didn't completely understand. Yeah. Excuse me. I didn't completely understand how challenging it was gonna be to sell to the educational system.
Yeah. Well, and that's I feel like you've personally got,
Excuse me.
for lack of better words, almost 2, because you've got a product that needs to get into the hands of one demographic and be able to be understood and relatable to children, but children aren't making the buying decision. And then because you're going for education, goodness, but because you're going, oh, do you wanna take a minute for some more water?
Excuse me, I've been fighting a cold,
No, that's the worst.
and every so often it just pops back up, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's like that tickle in your throat too from the cold, and then I feel like when you're trying to stop it is when you just can't. You're like, "Gimme just take a second, drink some water, we'll
Feel
get it back
better.
up."
Okay, I think I'm good.
Okay. So, when we were chatting about you've got the 2 demographics. You've got the children who are ultimately going to be using the product and the service that you're creating, but they're not the ones making the buying decision. So then you have to then be able to market and sell to the person who's gonna make the decision. And to me, if you're selling to a mom, it's very different than selling to an education system.
Yes, and we have a number of different markets that we're selling to. So
Okay.
we're selling to the educational system, which means we're selling to a kind of a corporate entity that has multiple decision makers, and it's often unclear who the decision maker is until you get pretty far down the road in the sales conversation. And then we're selling to homeschoolers, and, that's a really interesting market that we're just beginning to understand. And then we just sell to libraries. So one thing I didn't realize is how much of a hub the library is for a community and how they offer the community way more than just books. So I was talking to a potential customer, a prospect, about selling the curriculums in their elementary school. And she said they didn't have the funding, but did I consider selling it to the library because a lot of their teachers use the library for resources for their classroom. Well, this is something I didn't know. So I started researching libraries, and sure enough, there are all kinds of things that the library provides. Parents, homeschoolers, just people who need to get a GED, all kinds of interesting things. I found out that my local library actually offers for loan internet hotspots. They offer, like, what do you call them? Blood pressure cuffs.
Interesting.
So they meet all of these important needs in the community. So now we've started talking with libraries, and that has been a really fun conversation for us. So we have really 3 major demographics that we're selling to, and it makes
And
it a little challenging to understand how we market ourselves to each one. How do we
yeah.
brand ourselves for each one?
So when you're doing that though, then are you so then you're also that's even more challenging because now you're trying to keep your brand as like the umbrella, right? But then now you have to be very specific. So when you're going to speak to the homeschool crowd, the target market. Now, how are you managing to do that? Like a trick or a tip, not trick, but tip on how you're doing that while still maintaining your overall brand? Because I feel like for me, a lot of times what I recommend is picking a niche, which you have your children, that's who you're going after, but then you're finding in order to serve these children, you're gonna have to go talk to, in essence, it sounds like 3 different niches because 'cause you're talking to the library, and that's very different than if you're talking to a school board, I'm assuming, or whoever it is in the education space. And then the homeschool community is very different than either of those. But any tips on how you're navigating this?
I'm definitely not a branding expert, but I would say that our overall mission and our message is the same for all 3. And that is we have a curriculum that satisfies these certain needs that really has been a bit neglected in children for a long time, maybe even forever. And so we really talk a lot about the benefits of what our curriculum can do for children and what we're seeing the outcomes are for these students, and also how we're seeing the teachers being impacted and the families being impacted. So we talk a lot about the outcomes and the benefits. Our logo stays the same no matter what, and it's a really clean logo. Um, and really, our tagline and everything all stays about the same. There's a little bit of a language difference that we use. You use specific words in the educational world when you're talking to the school systems, and partially that is because their actual funding is tied to specific language,
Mhm.
which sounds really weird, but
Makes sense.
I mean, if you use certain words, they won't get funded. If you use certain words, they will get funded.
Interesting.
So you have to be very intentional about the language you use when you're talking to a school system. And then it's similar in the homeschooling world. So you kind of have to be very intentional about the language you use because there are certain words that we have to use when selling to the educational system that if we use selling to homeschoolers, it has a very different interpretation. So we're aware of all of that. And then libraries is really a little bit more corporate. So it's kind of more of it's really more of a just a traditional language that we would use rather than a specific educational or homeschooling. And it's similar to when you're selling yourself to any client. You wanna speak the client's language so that they don't have to work so hard to understand what you're wanting to say.
I love it.
And that's a skill to learn, to learn the language of who it is that you're talking to. And it's some people have said, "Well, that's not authentic." It is very authentic in that you're wanting to be understood. Me, as a person who is selling a product, I'm wanting the person that I'm selling to know what it is that I'm selling. And the only way for me to do that is to make sure I understand how they're interpreting the language I'm using.
Not
Because
authentic.
otherwise, they're making assumptions about things that maybe aren't true.
I'm surprised by someone telling you that that's not authentic because I'm listening to you speak and like, I'm not a branding expert. Okay, but you've done a lot of branding and you seem to have gotten the gist of it, but it all comes back to that foundation, and it's exactly what you said. Our values and our mission stays exactly the same. The only thing that we're changing is the words that we're using to communicate what we do and who we serve. And then here's a piece that I think a lot of people are missing. You're telling them the benefit and the outcome. So in essence, you're doing case studies, for lack of better words, where we tend to get caught up in a lot of people. What I see happening is I'm just going to tell you what I do and how I can serve you. And we forget to tell them what that means. Like, what does that mean for you? And so, what is the outcome that you're going to get through working with me? But no, I think that's very clear and you've managed it. And yes, it's a work in progress and it takes a lot of research, but you're staying true to who you are and what you want to do. And now you're just overcoming a hurdle of if I'm going to go speak to the library, I need to use certain terminology because that's who the client is versus if I'm speaking to the homeschool and I would be interested and I don't know enough about it to say like exactly to pinpoint, but I would think that there's actually some things that you would use in the school board that a homeschool mom would actually be like, "Oh, that doesn't apply to us." Because there's certain words and terminologies and frameworks that the school would need, where a homeschool is built a little different. Now, ultimately, the service that you're providing is benefiting the children, and so you have to tweak it so that they don't think that I got turned off by that one word because you said Okay, forgive me, but curriculum. It's like, well, we don't call it curriculum, we call it this. So no, that's meant for like a different program. That's not ours. Where you're like, well, curriculum, or if I call it, plan or framework or something, now you're speaking my language. So no, I think you get to see
Is
authenticity.
exactly it. I was just talking to a woman who canceled a sales call with me because we use the word curriculum, and they don't buy curriculums, they buy kits.
Okay,
So it's so fascinating, and that's what I mean, she immediately made a decision because of that single word.
interesting.
And so it's just learning. It's learning the demographic and understanding their language. And the responsibility is on me as the person who is wanting to make sure that I am meeting their needs. I'm not just selling a product. I'm selling a solution to a problem that they have. And so it's important that I do the work to understand what is their problem. How do they language that problem?
And
And
how
then
can I
how
speak it?
how does my product meet that need?
Yes, speaking their language. And we do this in a lot of places. We talk about translation, whether it be from English to Spanish to, German, French, whatever. You see that everywhere because it can be that simple whenever you're saying something, if you're saying it in a language that they don't understand, but it's the same when you're talking to a different demographic. And this is why you have to know ultimately what is their desires, what are their pain points, what are triggers.
Mhm.
Curriculum, do not use that word if you're talking to a homeschool. And I was like, "Man, I didn't know, but I kind of assumed," and I was like, "Okay, nailed it." Like, I didn't know that what the other word was, but that's awesome. And then I got it. Okay, so one last piece before we wrap up today. There's something else that came up, and you mentioned you have to know, and yes, you do. You have to be on it, but there's also been some things that you have said that you have got out and gotten some help from a marketing expert. I have some privy to conversations before we got on the podcast, but there was something else that you said too that I loved. You are staying in your lane. You're holding on to the values and the mission and making sure that ultimately the business stays the same, but you're not doing it all by yourself. When it comes to executing, you have a team. And
Mhm.
so you have a team of 5, you have a PR person, and then you have contractors that you're using so that you can deliver this in a way. But talk to me a little bit about how you're using your expertise and then capitalizing and maximizing on expertise of others so that you can ultimately fulfill your desire and your mission.
Well, as the CEO and leader of the company, one of the things that's really important to me is to keep the people who are working for me working in their unique ability. So they're going to be happier, they're going to be more productive, they're also going to be more creative within that position. So we're constantly having conversations of, when I ask them to do something, is this something that you feel is in your unique ability? And usually the workflow goes where they try it, and if they decide, "Oh, this is kind of fun, it's a new challenge, I'm enjoying learning how to do this," or it's like, "No, hating this, let's see what else we can do," or, "It's fun, it's interesting, but it's taking up way too much of my time, and I'm really much better spending my time doing this." Within that process, we recognize, keep them in their unique ability, find other people outside of our organization that can satisfy the needs that my own team can't satisfy. And it's like do our best to provide opportunities for those contractors to be in their unique ability. So we also kind of make sure that they're not just taking a job to take a job, that we are actually we're tickling their passion, so to speak. We're allowing them to really enjoy the work that they're doing. So we hired an illustrator who happened to be the illustrator for Dora the Explorer for all of our books. I mean, it just kind of happened by accident. And the guy is brilliant and he's fast and he loves doing the work. We hired a graphic designer and she does all of our print type collateral, and she also helps us like understanding the visualizations for our websites and things like that. And she loves it. She creates these things called sprints where she just likes to kind of challenge herself that way. And so she'll do a day sprint and she'll do all these different projects in a day. And it really keeps her energized, it keeps her creative. And, she's definitely working in her unique ability.
It's awesome. So the unique ability and capitalizing on it. And I think that's where so many of us as entrepreneurs, when we started out for a mission and a vision to be able to provide a service. But then when you start running your own business, there's so many different facets to it. And so when I came from corporate and I went on my own, I was like, man, I was really good at this one area of my business and I had all this other support. And then it's hard to know when the right time is or how do you push it. And I find myself aligning the same. So I have a VA that works with me. And as I bring on new levels of responsibility because I've taken on something else or exploring a new realm or launching a podcast or whatever the case may be, one of the things that comes up, and I do something similar where I start to have a conversation. It's like, this is the need. And if there's pushback, and I've actually had people challenge me and say, well, then just train her. She should be able to do it. I'm like, I mean, maybe, but if she's not comfortable and she's not happy with it, then it becomes kind of a source of contention where it's like, okay, I could do this. I may have to do this. But, and so that's one of my recommendations when it comes to entrepreneurship and you're trying to decide what to outsource. Start with yourself and look at all of the things that you have on your own plate and what lights you up. What is your zone of genius that no one else should be doing for your business? And then what are all the things that you're really not the expert in that maybe you could figure it out, but my question is always, should you? Like, you could be doing it, but should you be? And can you use someone else with their expertise? And so I've done something similar where I've aligned people. I have a systems girl. It takes me 5 hours to try to get one system to talk to another to do something else. And this woman can come on and literally in 30 seconds, she's got it talking and doing all the things. And I'm like, I don't even understand, but that's great. I'm so glad, but that is her zone of genius. And
Yep.
so being able to align myself with people who are experts in areas that are just not my strength has been a game changer. And it sounds like you've done the same because you have a product, you have a vision, but it doesn't mean that you have to be a graphic designer and an illustrator. And I think you said instructional design. Like, there's these things
Yep.
where everyone's got an area, but I love the fact that you're willing to have that conversation and say, like, do you want to try it? Are you enjoying it? If you're not, let's find someone who this lights them up because ultimately the end product is going to be so much better.
And be prepared to not always hit the right person on the first try. So, I mean, sometimes it takes a couple and rather than looking at it as this person is the be all and the end all, like if it doesn't work with this person, I'm done, I'm going back to doing it myself. I look at each person that we hire as a contractor as an opportunity to learn more about what we need for that position. And so sometimes we'll cycle through like when we hired before we hired our illustrator, we had 3 or 4 people that we had interviewed, we had do samples. We went quite a ways down the road before we finally found the right illustrator for us. Same with graphic design, same with instructional design and curriculum design. But once you find the right person, they are an invaluable member of your team. And also, they feel passionate about the work you're doing, even though they don't work for you. So, yeah.
I worked with several people before I went out on my own, and I'm like, and I even with my clients now, sometimes I feel like I'm more excited and a cheerleader for them than they are for themselves. I'm like, I really do want you to succeed.
Mhm.
So you just have to find those people. But the key to that, because you brazed over it so quickly, is that just because the first person or second person that you find is not the right fit does not mean that you have to take it back on yourself. It just means you haven't found the right person yet. Okay, and then I have one more question on this because this is something that I struggled with for a long time and I would just like your take. Outsourcing is hard. It can be a costly piece. How did you know it was the right time and how do you overcome the cost versus the benefit?
My gosh, if you really put numbers to paper, it's much less expensive to outsource than to hire your own employee.
True, there's that.
I didn't make the decisions because of the cost. I made it because sometimes managing employees is such a challenge. You're not just managing the work that that person is doing, but you're managing the benefits. So there's all the HR responsibilities that come along with it. When you have a contractor, we have found that for us, we are project based now. So with an employee, they're working for you full time or part time, however you hire them. And it's an ongoing thing, that you're giving them jobs and they're doing the work. It's sometimes hard to hold people accountable to KPIs.
Mm.
So to the key performance indicators, because as soon as you get done with one, you're moving on to the next. And the results are often hard to measure. But when you're hiring a contractor, you establish those KPIs at the beginning. These are the key things that are most important for us with this project. And then you assess that at the end of the project. So there's a very clear beginning, there's a clear understanding or scope of work. And then at the end, there's a very clear conversation about what worked, what didn't work, and you pay the money and it's done. And then you move on to the next project. So all of our contract work is project based
I
with
love
our
the project base.
illustrator, with our designers, with our curriculum instruction designers, with our graphic designer. We do. It makes it much easier for us to manage, and it's also been so much more cost effective for us.
So the cost effective between the employee and the independent contractor for sure. And then what about even just decided to take on an independent contractor because you had to outsource? So for people who are a little smaller and not ready, like they don't have anybody on their team, how did you know you were ready to take that first leap into even outsourcing, period?
I would say the pain got really intense. I mean, we were doing everything ourselves at the beginning, and it was a little bit like my husband has a phrase, eating fork with a spoon or eating soup with a fork. You're working, 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 and you're not really getting things done well enough for it to feel very productive. And because it's not your sweet spot. So everything takes you so long, and then when it's complete, it's not really that good. So then you have to do it again, or you have to do it 3 or 4 times, which is really what we did before we ended up going with the system that we have now.
When the pain gets too hard.
The pain just gets so intense and you start looking at the cost
When
to
I
do business, and it's
I think for me, there's that. The pain gets intense. And then you really have to sit down and ask yourself, what is it costing you? Because you do have a value for your work and your time. And then I think for me, the trigger was it just wasn't getting done. Like it kept living on the to do list. And I'm like, okay, I have to figure out a way to be able to make this consistent and to happen. And I sat down and calculated how many hours I was spending on it, and then you nailed it when it was like I had to do it again, or I was finding myself trying 3 or 4 times and then still having to pay someone to do it because I couldn't get it done right the first time. So yeah, that's my recommendation. I'm gonna tag in with Annamarie's. When the pain is just too intense, that's when you look to outsource, and it's probably a little too late. You should have probably done it already.
great. You should have done it already.
Yes, when the pain is too intense, you're too late, you should have already outsourced, and then my number 1 recommendation too is what brings you the least amount of joy? When it comes to doing, "I have to do X," and you literally dread it and you hate it and you find yourself moving it to tomorrow endlessly, it's because you just don't wanna do it, and if it needs to be done, I equate it to taxes. The taxes have to get done, guys. If you don't like to do taxes, find someone that'll do it for you because at the end of the day, you just have to get it done. You have to determine what is really gonna help you move the needle in your business and what parts of those things you just either really do not enjoy doing, or for me, it was a combination of I really didn't enjoy doing it, or I just did not have the time. Like, it kept coming up to and so I think I outsourced social media was the first thing that I let go. I know how to do it. I know what needs to be done, but at the end of the day, I kept finding that it was on the to-do list endlessly. I didn't need to be the one doing it. I can tell you what I want. I can be very clear in my strategy and my focus. This is exactly the KPIs, the key performance indicators. This is exactly what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this amount of posts to be with this strategy and tell me how much it's going to cost. And when I sat down and looked at what they were going to charge me compared to the opportunity cost and the fact that it took me so long to do it myself, so easy. It was an easy decision then. So,
Absolutely.
it's like you put the money to the like, put paper to, like, the money, just figure it out and just write down the numbers, and it really you just have to decide, what is the cost of it not getting done? Or what's it the cost to you of doing it 1, 2, 3, 4 times over, and it's still not being right, and then having to go back and fix it again. So, all of those
Yeah, with
beautiful
our
nuggets.
team, when we're going through projects and we're looking at the jobs that got done on time, the jobs that didn't get done on time, often the things that are procrastinated the most are the things that we could have outsourced.
I like that. What you procrastinate the most on. That's gonna be a new tagline. What are you procrastinating on? Is that something that you should let go of and then figure out what that best solution looks like for you? Well, Anna Marie, I really enjoyed our conversation. If anyone has been listening and they would like to know more about your curriculum or your book, where can they find you?
So curriculum information would be mindbodyalign.com.
Or kits? Right, curriculum or kits, depends on who's listening.
Curriculum or kit, mindbodyalign.com. And the book, Right Side of Happiness, more information can be found at Annamarie Fernyak.
I love it. Well, and you can also find that in the show notes if anyone is driving or listening and not in a place that you can write that down. And so thank you so much again for your time. Anyone that's been listening today, we appreciate you listening or watching. And if you know of anybody that could benefit from listening to this episode, please be sure to share and tune in next week to the Branded Impact Podcast. That's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Branded Impact Podcast. If today's episode sparked something in you, please take a second to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend who's ready to unlock their rebrand era. And if you're ready for a brand that's rooted in authenticity and built for impact, one that truly reflects your story, your energy, and your evolution, let's connect. Head to brandingbyjo.com or DM me on Instagram at brandingbyjo. Thanks for hanging out. Now get out there, show up with purpose, and make your branded impact. I'll see you next week.